Tales of Mithrym.
Scales of Justice, read by Ennatos. Part 14. Escape. Fires were burning everywhere. Thick black smoke billowed and rose from the buildings as the whole city burned. Sandstone structures collapsed in on themselves as ancient beams buckled and brought down whole blocks of the city. The air thickened with dust and echoed with the shouts and cries of the fleeing people. The roar of the dragons could be heard in all directions. Elvin, Ducky, and Derville ran down the remains of one street. Derville had pulled her scarf around her face to shield her from the smoke. Elvin and Ducky each held up rags to do the same, but were forced time and again to stop and cough in the thick, hot air. At length they came to an overhang of the city walls. Stooping under the rock face, they huddled and looked about for any sign or hope of escape. Beneath them, the ground itself seemed to echo with the thudding of large feet. They drew in closer to avoid detection. Derville craned forward to look up, though she realized that the sounds were not, in fact, coming from inside the city. She gestured wildly to the other two, and they quickly darted away as the wall itself began to creak and groan under an immense pressure. Moments later, the rock began to crumble. Large pieces of stone hurtled down from the heights above, smashing hard into the ground and throwing up more and more dust into the air. Another dragon stepped through. Its scales gleamed as the remains of the defenses fell from them. Its enormous head, far larger than any of the beasts they had seen so far, looked this way and that. Onlookers were dumbfounded and halted in their flight as they looked upon it, though. Its scales, hard and bright, were a vivid red. The great creature, perceiving the black dragons moving through the city, raised its head and roared. This was not like the growl of the dragons they had met before. This was a deep, ethereal growl. It made the ground shake, and the air, heavy still with smoke and dust, seemed to clear. This was a roar that could have shaped the earth beneath it. The creature beat its feet against the ground, and it seemed to echo like the fall of a hammer on an anvil. Each and every one of the black dragons stopped what it was doing and looked towards the newcomer. They roared in response, a sound that seemed almost childish in comparison. There was a look of fear mixed with excitement on their dark faces as they took it in. Then, each in turn, they rose into the air like a swarm, black against the bright sun, casting grim shadows on the ground beneath them. The enormous red dragon roared again. Its mouth glistened with white, hot fire as it did. There were words in that roar, old words, older than humanity, and older than the hills themselves. The black dragons flew towards it as the red dragon spread its enormous wings, and with one almighty torrent of air, it ascended into the sky. The people of the city looked in wonder as the dragons flew away. Fires were still burning, but the air seemed to have cleared somewhat. There was a lull in the sounds of chaos, and people began to emerge from the wreckage of homes and businesses to look upon the destruction left in the wake of the beast's departure. "Stop them!" a voice called. Derville quickly turned to look, springing up, ready to run. The words were not aimed at them, though. A woman had strode out into the street and was pointing towards several of the city leaders, who were making their way with Notley and some of the other embassy staff in tow. A crowd was forming again, and it quickly engulfed them. "Peace!" someone called from the crowd. "That's what they promised us! That's what they said those beasts would bring!" Cheers came from the crowd. "Please!" Notley called out. This is not a matter for me. I'm an emissary. This is not my... But his words trailed off. Your embassy burns. Like all of our city. You are just another fallen leader, came the response of the crowd. Should we do something? Derville whispered to Elvin and Ducky. They watched as the crowd began to hold and bind the leaders. No, Elvin said after a time. This is not our city, and this is not our fight. Oi to that, Ducky growled. They turned and made their way slowly but surely through the wreckage of the wall. Outside, the air was clear, and the road to the hills was empty. To begin with, they moved from cover to cover. In time, though, they came to the main road itself and began to walk. Then, when they saw the hillside close ahead, they broke into a run. They climbed and scrambled their way up through willows and palms and ferns, until they came to the very top. Then at last they rested. What in Ain's name has happened? Ducky shouted to the sky as he slumped down on the soft ground. Things seem to be changing, Elvin said as he dropped his things and sat down beside him. What was that thing? Derville asked, looking around to see if she could sight the dragons as they flew away. It was a dragon, Elvin said, wiping his forehead. Leastways, it looked like a real one. What do you know about them? He turned to look at Ducky. The great man had often been an endless source of fairy tales and monster lore. Ducky just scratched his head, though. Don't ask me, he said with a shrug. Granny didn't tell these sorts of stories. Real dragons? That's religious, that is. Proper old dawn of time stuff. This isn't the end, is it? Derville looked back at them. The dragons seemed to have disappeared beyond the horizon now. No, Elvin stroked his chin. I hazard this is just the beginning. In time they stood up again. They stretched, and then they rebuckled their packs and checked and resheathed their weapons. They turned to look, one last time, at the city of Alexia. Smoke was still rising from the smoldering remains of most of the city. Beyond it, the sea glinted and glistened in the afternoon sun. Come on, Elvin said, turning and walking away. Time to go.
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.